When the House Oversight Committee finally dropped more than 20,000 pages of Epstein-related documents, Washington totally froze. After years of rumors, political fights, and secret court filings, the public is finally getting a look at what people...
Tonight in newly released emails, ex-offender Jeffrey Epstein repeatedly discussing Donald Trump, shedding new light on their long friendship, and seeming to suggest Trump had information he never shared. In a 2011 exchange with his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein writing the, quote, dog that hasn't barked.
According to the Democrats, the public deserves to see everything about the people governing them, especially their president. No more secrets, no more cherry-picked documents, no more protecting powerful people. But the thing is, the moment the files were released, the whole thing turned into a political storm. Democrats had already shared 3 emails from Epstein that mentioned interactions with Donald Trump. Republicans fired back by dropping thousands more pages and accusing Democrats of selectively leaking emails to create a fake narrative to smear President Donald Trump.
The escalating war of words within the GOP over the Epstein files, President Trump sparring with one of his most loyal allies, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, calling her a traitor in a social media post. Greene firing back as a critical vote on the Epstein files is set for Tuesday. ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang reports from Washington.
Tonight, just days before the House is set to vote on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, President Trump ramping up attacks on one of his closest allies. Trump declaring he's withdrawing his supported endorsement of Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of 4 Republicans who joined Democrats to force that vote. Trump accusing Greene of betraying the entire Republican Party, calling her a ranting lunatic and a traitor. Greene firing back, questioning why the president is fighting so hard to stop the files from being released.
The president even suggested he'd be open to backing a challenger to her seat in Congress.
And I'm no longer much of a fan.
Greene punching back a series of social media posts. I never thought that fighting to release the Epstein files, defending women who were victims of rape, and fighting to expose the web of rich, powerful elites would have caused this. But here we are. The firebrand conservative has been a steadfast supporter of the president, often appearing by his side at campaign events.
We're going to re-elect our favorite president, the greatest president in United States history, Donald J. Trump.
He is charming. He is able to convince people. So he tells everybody what they want to hear.
So how do you know this?
That was close to straight.
He has a sense of humor. He can be funny.
He's great. His ability to sell. It's very much like Clinton. Both Bill and Donald have the ability to go over to a fat, ugly woman, say, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So you probably know he had a scalp reduction. Because he had the same male pattern woman that we all have. He's not a horrible human being. He does nasty things to his best friends' wives. Anyone who first tries to gain your trust and then uses it to do bad things.
That's how it. But the truth sitting in the documents was bigger than any political team. The email showed Epstein didn't stick to one side. He reached out to everyone. Republicans, Democrats, famous academics, media people, billionaires, and celebrities. He lived in every circle at once.
This is an actual email composed and sent by Larry Summers, former president of Harvard University, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, and former director of the National Economic Council. Not only did he have multiple email exchanges with Jeffrey Epstein, at least one of which was essentially asking him for dating advice, but imagine even receiving an email like this. It's hard to make heads or tails out of what's being said here. SoftBank deputy guy I liked and seemed aware and honest regarding son. Lots of slathering to Saudis. I yipped about inclusion. I observed that half the IQ in the world was possessed by women without mentioning they are more than 51% of population. I guess he wants a pat on the back for that. Mnuchin plumbs new depths. War seems more likely than I used to think. DJT is world's luckiest guy in terms of opposition economy, etc. Still think his world will collapse. I'm trying to figure why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and can't work at a network or a think tank. Do not repeat this insight sent from my iPad. This is almost as bad as reading a transcript of one of Trump's speeches, except for Larry Summers was, I guess, tapping this out on his iPad. I want to talk very briefly about two things in this email. The first is the comment about women's intellectual capacity. Some of you may recall that in 2005, when he was president of Harvard, he made comments at a conference that was about women and minorities in science, in which he basically said that women have less innate capacity for science, and that is why there are less women than men in science. These remarks were met with quite a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, and ultimately led to his resignation from that post. In 2005, I was a medical student at a place called Stanford University. I had graduated from college with a degree in biomedical engineering with a 3.97 GPA. I remember him making those comments and being absolutely livid that he suggested that someone like me could not succeed in science when I was doing that exact thing. Not only that, but there were many women at his own institution excelling in science. And here he was in 2017 still getting digs in at the expense of women. The other point I want to raise here is when he talks about this section, which is essentially him whining about cancel culture. I want to point out that this man went on to be the director of the National Economic Council after he left Harvard. He continues to be extremely prominent. He holds an endowed chair at Harvard University, and he is whining to a pedophile about cancel culture. As if that weren't bad enough, here he is in 2019 asking Jeffrey Epstein for advice on this situation. Pause to read. And yeah, he was married at that time, at least according to Wikipedia.
Summers also made comments about women that he told Epstein not to repeat, saying, "Do not repeat this insight." Then there was author Michael Wolff, who Epstein emailed for advice about stories involving Bill Clinton, Stephen Hawking, and others. Epstein wrote, "Clinton was never ever there. Never." When Epstein heard Reuters was preparing a story involving Trump, Wolff told him,
"New and incredibly revealing details about Jeffrey Epstein and his opinions of Donald Trump, someone that Epstein once called his closest friend for 10 years. The emails and text messages show that Epstein continued to be focused on Trump when he became president, questioning his sanity, psychoanalyzing him as someone who feels alone and might, quote, crack, even suggesting without explanation in one email, quote, "I am the one able to take him down." Obviously, in the context of all of this, you want to know more there, but we don't have the context. The two men, of course, were once extremely close. Several associates of both of them have told us over the past year that they were the best of.
Kept bringing up Donald Trump long after Trump said their friendship had ended. His private comments about Trump were, for the most part, remarkably negative and harsh. And he sort of often cast himself as someone who understood the former president's mindset. Now, in messages in 2017, he described him as, quote, effing crazy. You can see it right there, speculated he might have early dementia, called him a maniac, borderline insane. There was something where he compared him to a mob boss. There was something where somebody messaged him and said, Trump is truly stupid, to which he replied, duh. So, you know, one of the emails that we found that was very interesting was this one to Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, in which Epstein harshly described Trump, writing, quote, "I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body."
There were also messages with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince. Epstein forwarded him a Daily Mail story about allegations, and Andrew replied, "What? I don't know any of this. How are you responding?" Epstein reassured him, even cracking a dark joke. The only person she didn't have sex with was Elvis. And here's a big one.
Musk, Peter Thiel, who's currently on a tour talking about the Antichrist everywhere, and Steve all listed in this. You know what the craziest it is? I saw this clip from Joe Rogan recently. I forget exactly what I was watching. I was watching someone on YouTube. Talk about Peter Thiel, and they unearthed a clip from fairly recent, maybe, where Peter Thiel went on Joe Rogan. Thiel was like, yeah, I knew Jeffrey Epstein. Like, I have connections to him. And Joe Rogan was like, oh yeah, before he was arrested, right? And Peter Thiel was like, no, I hung out with him after he was arrested and was like a known pedophile.
I met Epstein a few times as well, and I think...
How'd you get introduced?
It was Reid Hoffman in Silicon Valley introduced us in 2014. But it was basically didn't ask enough questions about it. I think there were sort of a lot of things where it was fraudulent. I do think Epstein knew a lot about taxes.
And you were introduced to him. How was he described to you?
He was described as one of the smartest tax people in the world.
Interesting.
And I probably was my moral weakness that I.
Well, how could you have known back then? He had never been arrested.
No, this was 2014. It was post arrest.
Oh, so his arrest was the first arrest, right?
Yeah,
which was like
2007, 08.
Okay.
And it's like, what do you mean? Why would you admit that you actively still hung out with him after he was a convicted? This is...
Thiel, in particular, has long been speculated to be a big asset of the Israeli lobby in America. And considering how Epstein is also strongly suspected to be a Mossad agent, it makes sense that the two would be so close even after Epstein's conviction. Whitney Webb is a very well-respected investigative journalist who specializes in reporting on the military-industrial complex and the elite class in America. And he